Welcome to another Quran study. God willing, today we'll be reading from Surah number 69, verse 18. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. This is Surah 69, incontestable, verse 18. On that day you will be exposed. Nothing of you can be hidden. The believers. As for the one who receives his record with his right hand, he will say, "Come read my record. I did believe that I was going to be held accountable." He has deserved a happy life in an exalted paradise. Its fruits are within reach. Excuse me. Eat and drink happily in return for your works in days past. So these verses are referring to the day of judgment. As we know that on the day of judgment, God says, nothing of you will be hidden. So everything will be exposed. All the works you have done, will be like an open book. And you'll be able to read your record, and, everybody will know your fate. You will know your fate for sure. And so God says, as for the believers, God says, they will receive their record with the right hand, versus the disbelievers who will be given their record behind their back. And so, as you can expect, the believers will be extremely happy and proud. It will be the best day for the believers. It's going to be an amazing feeling for the believers. They'll be very happy. And they will be so proud of it. They'll want other people to read their record. It's like you achieve something great. You want everybody in the world to see it, and you want to share it with everyone, and they're proud of it. But as for the disbelievers, as you can see, they just have regrets and sorrow, and so they are full of regret when they say, "Oh, I wish I never received my record. I wish I never knew my account. I wish my death was eternal." So just complete regret, which is just hard to imagine, the amount of remorse that a disbeliever will have. Now, the reason why, God is, God didn't have to mention all of this. God could have said, the believers go to hell, the believers go to heaven, the disbelievers go to hell. And believers get, extreme joy and happiness, and disbelievers get misery. But God is actually going to the expressions, that the thoughts that will run in the minds of these people on that day. Why? Because He wants us to realize that, He wants us to know in advance what that's going to be like, how these people are going to feel like. And so that we can work on it now and prepare for our eternal life. And so it says, "My money cannot help me. All my power is gone. Take him and shackle him. Burn him in hell. In a chain that is 70 arms long, tie him up. For he did not believe in God most great, nor did he advocate the feeding of the poor. Consequently, he has no friend here, nor any food except the bitter variety." So, food for the sinners. So these people, this example here, this is people who have money in this world, right? It says, "My money cannot help him. All my power has gone." Look at people like Pharaoh and Qarun, and people like them who exist in this world. People who would be willing to go to any low for money. And so on the day of judgment, this is where they stand. They're the weakest souls that exist, the poorest, in terms of their soul growth, right? And God says, in a chain that is 70 arms long, right? So let's say your arm is this long. Consider it increased by 70 times, and they'll be tied up. Obviously these descriptions are allegorical, but these allegories are closest as possible to what you can imagine, right? So imagine being tied up like that, and so God says they will be shackled like that, and then they will be burned and going through all the torment. So imagine like you sit somewhere for a while and you can't move and it makes you so uneasy. Now, on the day of judgment, being tied up like that, and going through all this torture. I mean, just the brain cannot even imagine, right? But this is God telling us all of these things so we can think about it, so we can be aware of it, so that these pictures stay in our minds and we figure out where we want to be on the day of judgment, right? And so God says they will not even have any friend. Now God says they did not feed the poor. They did not give. They did not advocate the feeding of the poor. So not only should we be feeding the poor, we should also be advocating the feeding of the poor. And God says consequently He has no friend here. So imagine someone not having any friend in this world, but on the day of judgment, it's just your eternal life. You're gonna be the loneliest person ever. Every disbeliever, because they will not have any friend. Who will be a friend of a disbeliever burning in hell? Nobody. Everybody around him will be going through the torment of hell themselves, and everybody will curse one another. Everybody they knew will curse them for misleading them, right? They'll lose their families, they'll lose everything. So they will be the loneliest people for eternity, And God says they will not even have any food except for the bitter variety, like stuff that you cannot eat, right? Imagine eating something that's gone off, like days and days, right? And you have to eat it. But it's going to be much worse than that. And because they did not feed the poor and they did not believe in God, the most great. So believing in God means we believe in all of His qualities, everything God says, we have to believe it. And not through just lip service, you have to show with your actions that you believe in God through every situation in your life. So verse 38 says, I swear by what you see and what you do not see. This is the utterance of an honorable messenger, not the utterance of a poet. Rarely do you believe, nor the utterance of a soothsayer. Rarely do you take heed. A revelation from the Lord of the universe. So God says, this is the utterance of an honorable messenger, not the utterance of a poet. So this Quran is the utterance of an honorable messenger, referring to Muhammad. And it says it is not the utterance of a poet, because people who just believed in the Quran considered Muhammad a poet, and because the Quran rhymes, and they say, well, he's a poet and a soothsayer, but it says nor the utterance of a soothsayer. It's not saying things to just things ideas that sound good. It's talking about the truth. It's a revelation from the Lord of the universe. So now we have physical, mathematical, tangible evidence that this is not poetry. This is beyond human composition, intricate, and extremely vast, a superhuman mathematical composition that exists behind these words, that prove that every single word and letter that we read in this book is from God, Lord of the universe. God says in verse 44, subtitle, Muhammad forbidden from issuing any religious teachings. Had he uttered any other teachings, we would have punished him. We would have stopped the revelations to him. Nothing of you could have helped him. None of you could have helped him. This is a reminder for the righteous. We know some of you are rejectors. It is but sorrow for the disbelievers. It is the absolute truth. Therefore, you shall glorify the name of your Lord most great. So first of all, we see that Muhammad was forbidden from issuing any religious teachings. So the only thing only mission that was given to Muhammad was the delivery of the Quran. The only hadith that Muhammad was supposed to preach to the people was the Quran, and that is all he delivered. And he was forbidden from issuing any religious teachings from his own. So God says, had he uttered any other teachings, we would have punished him. We would have stopped the revelations to him. So we know that God is in full control when it comes to his messengers. God is controlling each and everything the messenger is delivering, right? And so if the messenger is going to go his own way with what he wants to preach, obviously that is not going to work, right? And so God says that if that happened, then he would stop the revelations to him, and nobody could have helped him at that time, right? But this is because God is in full control, and so Muhammad was forbidden from issuing any teachings besides the Quran, and that's all he did. And if he had done something else, then God said he would have stopped the revelations to him. He would have punished him severely, right? So a messenger's job is to deliver just what God wants them to deliver. They're not there, and they're not, I mean, they're incapable of going against delivering the right message, So whatever God delivers to them, they give that message. Of course, in his personal life, Muhammad made mistakes, right? In his personal application of what was required of him, we know that he wasn't infallible. In fact, God says that he made mistakes. Like the one example we see is Muhammad ignoring the blind man, right? And so this just recently got me thinking about this one scenario that somebody was bringing up to kind of like twist something from the account of the Messenger of the Covenant, just all based on their own personal opinion, right? But just the argument itself was flawed in the way it was explained, like it was put forward, and so they started talking about the hypocrites and why they believe that nobody's an enemy of God, and only the ones who are physically fighting and all this stuff, and that we should all be like brothers and sisters, and we should all commingle with each other and all this stuff. And then what they tried to do is try to give the example of Rashad as a messenger, saying that he was with the hypocrites and he was nice to the hypocrites and he allowed them to come to conferences and for years, and all this scenario, I mean, built in their heads, right? So many hypocrites were exposed to him. When they were exposed to him, he dealt with them very harshly, as we have seen, right? In the some of the evidence that we have seen from the videos and things we have heard from the audios. But we shouldn't take an example like that, take it out of context. Like say, that woman Susan in one of the conferences, we see that he points her out, he exposes her in front of everybody, and but he says, someone used that to say, no, look, she was in that conference, and then she was in some previous conference. I don't even know how he knows she was in the previous conferences, but let's say she was, and he still was okay with it for the sake of argument. Even if he was okay with it, we know that we're doing the exact same thing that people were doing with Muhammad. People started doing with Muhammad, right? It's like Muhammad did this and Muhammad did that, and so now hadith is created, right? And so these people have their own accounts of what Rashad did and said. This includes people who were with Rashad and people who were not with Rashad, making lies about him, right? And then using his example of his life and what he did to create a religious law on how you should deal with the hypocrites, for example, right? And so it's a very similar argument to say, like, okay, so let's say, we know that Muhammad ignored the blind man, right, when he came to him. So now we should start ignoring every person who has disability because Muhammad ignored the blind man. So we can use that example and start doing that, right? So we see like how that plays out, like when you start to use someone's person example, right? So that's completely different. But looking at him as a messenger, all the teachings that he preached, all the laws, everything that he explained from the Quran, those are things that he is required as a messenger to deliver to other people, right? And in that, he's not going to make any mistakes. He's not going to like throw in his personal opinions and stuff, but his own life, his own examples, like, he may make mistakes, but we shouldn't be looking at his life per se. We should be looking at his message and what he preached rather than how he did things in his personal application of the message, right? And him as a man, ignored the blind man. And so, the thing is, like, many people were, for example, with Rashad also at the time that he didn't know were not believers, and he thanked them and he said they were good believers and stuff like that. Some of them are mentioned in the thanked in the acknowledgement and stuff like that too. But we know that is a human aspect of it, and we shouldn't look at that to like create laws out of it, right? And so we have to be careful. There's a very fine line between how we use a messenger as a reference. A messenger is a reference, so just like Muhammad is a reference, because we go with the message that he preached. The message that he preached was the Quran, right? And so there was nothing wrong with it, but we don't go by what people say Muhammad said or Muhammad did, right? Many people came in and said Muhammad did this and Muhammad did that, Muhammad did that, right? And so this is, but Muhammad wasn't supposed to deliver any teachings besides the Quran. He only delivered the Quran in the time that he was around the people, since the revelation started coming to him till the time he passed away. The Quran was just coming to him in stages, and that's all he was busy delivering. He was not creating other laws, and all these books that have been written have been fabricated by people who were insulting the Prophet. All these books of hadith are created to insult the Prophet by his enemies. Things that have been published. If you read those, I mean, they're ridiculous, and they're dehumanizing details of accounts of someone whose personality you just hate, that you just want to make a cartoon out of it, make a mockery out of it. Things that have been said about Muhammad, like if you go through them, like it's laughable. And but we know that Muhammad only delivered the Quran, and that was his message, and he didn't deliver anything else. God says if he did, he would have stopped it right there and then, and so that also goes on to teach us that a messenger doesn't fabricate lies about God. He doesn't preach his personal opinion. He only delivers what God sends him to deliver. He doesn't play games with people, like when they say that don't listen to anything. When Rashad says that, people use that as an example often, that Rashad's Khalifa said that don't do anything, follow me if I tell you to follow something other than the Quran. So now we have to decide, like, what he said is it do we agree with it? Is it according to the Quran or not according to them? And if they don't find it themselves personally the same as what Rashad is preaching as a messenger, then they reject it, right? But that's not the point. As a messenger, you have to follow the messenger, and you have to follow, and you're not supposed to place your opinion above that of the messenger. But the thing is that there were hypocrites at the time, and there are hypocrites now, right? And so the job of the hypocrites is to, create confusion, is to create doubts, and mislead other people based on lies, right? A messenger doesn't do that, but people will do these things and mislead other people. So we have to be careful, and we have to ask God to continue to guide us and strengthen us and show us, because really, it's just something that we realize that, we're so dependent. Of course, God is the only one who guides, and we're really dependent on God's guidance. Like at any time, like people can get misguided by these things. I mean, there's traps set everywhere by Satan for people. Satan comes from all different angles, right? And so we have to be very careful not to be influenced by hypocrites and the lies that they promote, and the ways that and means that they come towards you to try to make you compromise the truth. And God says, this is a reminder for the righteous. We know some of you are rejectors. It is but sorrow for the disbelievers. It is the absolute truth. Therefore, you shall glorify the name of your Lord most great. So therefore, we must ask God for guidance, and we must glorify Him and worship Him to grow our souls. Because we're required to remember God day and night. We're supposed to glorify Him. We're supposed to appreciate His qualities on why God is great. Remembering why He's God and what are His qualities. We're supposed to focus on that. To allow us to grow as our souls, just like our bodies. We need our food. We need this. These reminders, we need this glorification, this commemoration, so that we can grow our souls. The real person is not your body, the real person is your soul. So you may look at your body and you think you're healthy, but you can't see your soul. The soul is obscured by the body. But when you die, you will see your soul, and some people's soul will be so small they will not even be able to see anything. It's just going to be in the negative, or maybe like a small cat or a mouse, right? But the believers who will glorify God and commemorate God day and night, when they look at their souls, they will be giants, as big as countries or states, right? And so you can imagine the differences in the size of the souls. I mean, on this planet, like you have smaller differences, like maybe a couple of feet. The smallest guy is probably like 4 feet tall, and the tallest guy is like 10 feet or 9 feet, right? But on the Day of Judgment, the differences are going to be huge, huge. So we have to really work on our souls, and make sure that your soul is nourished enough that when God manifests Himself, we're able to withstand His presence and not run to hell. Because that's what's going to happen to disbelievers. When on the Day of Judgment, they will not be able. Their soul will be so small and so weak that they will not be able to withstand God's physical presence, and they will just run to hell on their own. They'll just run to hell, and they'll just try to make their way, whatever way possible, just run towards it, because that's all they can endure at that time. And God's presence will just be like extreme torment for them, at that time. They will not be able to withstand it. So God willing, I will read Surah 70, the heights, Al-Ma'arij. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. A questioner may question the inevitable retribution. For the disbelievers, none can stop it. From God, possessor of the highest height. The angels, with their report, climb to Him in a day that equals 50,000 years. Therefore you shall resort to a gracious patience, for they see it far away, while we see it very close. The day will come when the sky will be like molten rocks, the mountains will be like fluffy wool. No friend will care about his close friend. When they see them, the guilty will wish he could give his own children as ransom to spare him the retribution of that day. Also his spouse and his brother, even his whole tribe that raised him, even all the people on earth, if it would save him. No, it is a flame eager to burn. It calls on those who turn away, those who hoarded and counted. So God talks about a questioner who may question the inevitable retribution. So questioning in the sense of, they doubt, they're not sure if it will happen or not. But God says, for the disbelievers, no one can stop it from God, possessor of the highest height. So God is more powerful than anything or anyone, and so one of his attributes is that he is the possessor of the highest height, and that is why the title of this surah is the heights. And we see that God says the angels with the report climb to him in a day that equals 50,000 years. Now angels are also big giants, as we know, and they have tremendous powers, but they climb to him in a day that equals 50,000 years, right? So it's a different, concept of time and space that we cannot possibly even grasp at this point. But God says that, it's equal to 50,000 years, And so imagine if a day is equal to 50,000 years, then how far is the day of judgment? It's very close. So God says, for they see it far away, but while we see it very close. So it's just around the corner, basically. Less than 300 years, right? So it's just around the corner. For they see it far away while we see it very close. The day will come when the sky will be like molten rocks. God says the sky will be like molten rocks, as we know that when God comes down with the angels on the day of judgment, the heavens and the earth as we know it will fall apart, because this world is not designed to withstand God's physical presence. It is there for Satan to, prove his godhood as a temporary God, for his constituents, to be tested on earth if his claims that he could be a God besides God. So when on the day of judgment, all of this will fall apart, right? The sky will fall apart. The mountains will be like fluffy wool. They will be completely crushed. And God says no one will care about his close friend. And on that day, people will be willing to go through any length just to save them the torment of hell on that day, right? So God says they'll give their spouse, their brother, even their whole tribe. Even if everybody on earth they could just give to spare them, they would do it. Not that they can do it, they can't do anything. If you've done something, you're paying for it. And so, this is just a very helpless situation at that point, right? But the thing is, these people deserved it because God says they turned away from God on this earth while they're living their lives. When you present them the message, they arrogantly turn away as if they never heard it, and they keep on hoarding money and counting it because that's all they're concerned about, because that's all they see, that's all they believe in. They think that's all it's about. You just earn money as much as you can. It's so normal, right? That's what everybody's doing. Majority of people on earth, and that's why majority of people are just going to hell. Not that there's anything wrong with making money, but but not that it should be the only thing that concerns you, right? Making money is part of life and living in this world. You have to do it, but making it your God and just making your life all about that, which is most people, is not the right way, right? People just love money so much, and they're doing everything they can possibly to make as much money as possible, right? And to just be complete transgressors in how they make money. If we begin to realize the lengths of just utter gross lowliness that people can, I don't find the words to say it, right? People go to extreme lengths, just the lowest lows to make money. People kill their loved ones for money. just so they can get everything, right? And people cheat, people lie, people steal, kill, do anything possible just to make more money, and they don't care about if it's right or wrong, if they're wronging someone in the process. No, they just want what they want, and that's what it's about for most people. If it's not money, it's something else, but the idea is the same. God is the last thing on their minds, right? And which is pretty much the norm for everyone, right? And there's many people that use lip service to say it's all about God, they're all about God, and they're all about money, right? All these false religionists that we see, all these hypocrites, all about money. So God says they hoarded and counted. Verse 19 says, "Indeed, the human being is anxious, if touched by adversity, despondent, if blessed by wealth, stingy. Except for the worshippers, who always observe their contact prayer salat, part of their money is set aside for the poor and the needy. They believe in the day of judgment. They reverence their Lord's requital. Their Lord's requital is not taken for granted." So the believers, on the other hand, God says, are different. But everybody else, God says, these people, when they're touched by adversity, they're despondent, they're anxious. You can see the anxiousness in people, like when little stuff happens here and there, people start to panic. They are afraid. They have all kinds of fear. And then if a little bit of adversity befalls them, they become despondent, they despair, they go into depression, and so many things, right? And if they're blessed by wealth, they're extremely stingy and selfish. But God says that on the other hand, the believers, they have just one way of dealing with everything. They'll always observe their contact prayers, always, and part of their money is set aside. So you have your obligatory charity always set aside, and on top of that, you're giving whatever you can to the poor and the needy. And God says they believe in the day of judgment, and they reverence their Lord's requital. And so very important is that they're mindful of the day of judgment. They're worried about the hour. They don't take the hour for granted, it says. So they know for a fact that it's going to happen, and they're not complacent about it. They're worried about it, and they're working hard. So those are the people that will be the winners on that day. God says they keep their chastity, verse 29. They have relations only with their spouses, or what is legally theirs. Anyone who transgresses these limits is a sinner. And the believers keep their word. They are trustworthy. Their testimony is truthful. They consistently observe the contact prayer salat on time. They have deserved a position of honor in paradise. So these are all the qualities of the believers, right? God says that they also keep their chastity. They always keep their chastity. They only have relations with their spouses, or what is legally theirs, meaning common law partners. If before you come into submission, if you've had a common law partner, which you live with a person for a certain amount of time, but with the intention that this is the only person you're going to be with. When you come into submission, God recognizes that, right? So that's what it means, what is legally theirs. But we know marriage is a divine institution, and God wants people to get married. It's a commandment. If they want to be with someone, they have to get married, follow all the requirements, give the dowry, everything. But nevertheless, if you came into submission after having a common law partner, that's still your spouse, and so either way, the person's your spouse. And so you only have sexual relations with your spouse and nobody else. And God says anyone who transgresses these limits is a sinner. God says the believers keep their word, very important. Many times we may not take it seriously, but when we tell someone we're going to do something, we should keep our word. And God says they're trustworthy, right? So if you keep your word, naturally you'll be trustworthy. You'll say something, rest assured, you people know that you will follow through with with your actions, and because you are going to keep your word, you will be a man or a woman of your word, right? It's just something that people take very lightly, but God wants us to keep our word. God wants people to be trustworthy. The believers are trustworthy, and God says they keep their word. God says their testimony is truthful. They're not liars. They're not dishonest people, and they do their part by being honest. They observe the contact prayer salat on time, and God says they have deserved a position of honor in paradise. Subhanallah. So verse 36 says, "What is keeping those who disbelieve from joining you? To the right and to the left they flee. How can any of them expect to enter the blissful paradise? Never. We created them, and they know from what. I solemnly swear by the Lord of the East and the West, we are able to substitute better people in your place. We can never be defeated. Therefore let them blunder and play until they meet the day that is awaiting them. That is the day they come out of the graves in a hurry, as if herded to the sacrificial altars. With their eyes subdued, shame will cover them. That is the day that is awaiting them." And so we see here that, it's a rhetorical question that, we need to ask ourselves, like, what is keeping people from preventing people from joining us? We look at submission, we look at submitters, and we wish that there were more people, seeing the truth. You find the truth, it's a great treasure, and you want everybody to see it. But you see, most people are just turning away. They just look down or just ridicule, and they just turn away. But God says, why? How can they expect to enter the blissful paradise? It should baffle us, because here we have people who are dedicating their lives to serving God, as God says, right? And then you have people who believe that so and so died for their sins, or so and so is going to save them on the day of judgment, and they can just live whatever way they want, having no care about the hereafter, and then just expect to go in a place as wonderful as paradise. In this world, they know that, if you want to go someplace that's nice, you have to work towards it, right? But then they're expecting that something as wonderful as paradise, where you have endless blessings from God. It's unfathomable, it's indescribably beautiful, and you just expect to just get in there. How? Right? It doesn't make sense, because they don't believe it. But God says, how can they expect? People have wishful thinking, right? People are doing all kinds of things, and then they think they're just going to end up in paradise. And God says, no, that's not going to happen. And God gives the allegory also, which God says, until a camel passes through the needle's eye, it will never happen, in other words, right? So we have to work towards earning of the blissful paradise. We have to do everything possible as we, when we are alive, as we're living in this life, to be mindful of it, and lead a righteous life, so that we can get there. But God says these people, what is keeping them? They flee to the right and left. God says, I solemnly swear by the Lord of the East and the West. So the Quran is swearing by the Lord of the East and the West. We are able to substitute better people in your place. So God says that He's able to substitute better people in our place. We can never be defeated. So we can see that God, the word is used here in the plural tense, and we know that when we see we instead of I, for example, that basically refers to God and his angels, right? But obviously we know God is the one who's doing everything, and so the this is part of God's system, that God has angels participating in certain things as part of his system. And so God says we can substitute better people in your place. We can never be defeated. So God and his army can never be defeated. Therefore, let them blunder and play until they meet the day that is awaiting them. So let them do whatever they want, basically, And this is what's happening. I mean, people are, doing all kinds of mischiefs, doing all kinds of sins, and God is letting them, do whatever kind of blunders people are making. I mean, you look at the news, and you see the amount of chaos that's happening around us, right? And God is just letting it all happen, so that everybody can be paid for whatever they're doing. And God says, until they meet the day that is awaiting them, which is the day of judgment. And God says they will come out of their graves in a hurry on that day, as if being herded to sacrificial altars. In a hurry, so it's like, God gives the example of being herded to sacrificial altars. Imagine like all these animals, like sheep, being herded in a herd, in a group, going to be sacrificed, right? And that's kind of like similar. Like they're just on that day, they're just going towards their doom in a hurry. And God says, with their eyes subdued, shame will cover them. That is the day that is awaiting them. So it's a day full of shame, sadly, for these people, but nevertheless, they deserved it. They earned it. In fact, God says they insisted on going to hell, right? I mean, and you can tell that when you try to give the message to someone and how they insist on disbelieving, very conveniently, they just refuse to understand and reject it, and just continue to be whoever they want to be. And God allows them. God has given people complete freedom, but on the day of judgment, eventually it's going to catch up with people, right? People think in this world that they're getting away with all kinds of stuff, but on the day of judgment, it's going to catch up with them. And um, God says how difficult that day is going to be. Like, I mean, we cannot put that in words, but God has allegorically described to us, I mean, how terrible it is, right? On the other side, on the flip side, you have the believers, who will be very joyful and proud of everything that they will get. And so we should all, strive towards that. God has given us a lot of opportunities, especially this month of Ramadan, also to grow our soul, to take control of our bodies, and to take control of our souls, and worship God as much as possible, so that on the day of judgment, we can be one of the winners. So with this, God willing, I will end. If you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free. Thank you. Okay, so anybody has any comments or questions? Sorry, I cannot hear anyone.
Can you hear me, brother?
Yes, I can hear you guys now. Did you
Yeah,
guys say
okay.
anything before?
Yeah, I just said mashallah, God bless you. I believe it
Okay.
wasn't clear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem. Yeah, I didn't hear you guys. God bless you too. So, any comments?
SubhanAllah, there is something really interesting by the um, swears that God actually makes, and he says, I swear by what you see and what you do not see. This is the utterance of an honorable messenger. SubhanAllah. I mean, everything that we see and everything that we don't see. Like, for example, think about um, the matter in this world and the dark matter, that the scientists are talking about these days, that 67 percent, maybe more, of the weight of the universe is the dark matter. So it's what we don't see, and it's something that we cannot even um, um, basically we cannot even detect by any tool, and it's not of any kind of radiation or any kind of particle that scientists and physicists know of. So that's what we don't see, which is what we know as to be the higher dimensions, where basically angels and demons, basically the jinns, are living. They have access to our dimension. We don't have access to theirs, and God is swearing by um, all this, everything that we see and everything that we don't see, that this is the utterance of an honorable messenger. And it continues, not the utterance of a poet, rarely do you believe, nor the utterance of a soothsayer, rarely do you take heed. A revelation from the Lord of the universe. So this is, subhanAllah, this is really great. If we think about it, we we might get a glimpse of how great this book is, and our salvation is in this book. And as Dr. Khalifa, the messenger of the covenant, said, this is not a regular book. Anytime that you read it, you get something new out of it, because the teacher of Quran is God. Nobody is the teacher of Quran. That's why anytime that you read it, doesn't matter if you read it 1,000 times. Anytime that you read it, it feels like it's new information. You see some details, some nuances in the book that you couldn't see before. And interestingly enough, the same case is with listening to the messenger of the covenant, because the messenger is basically the mouthpiece of God, and God gives us the revelations that He wants to give us through His messenger. So when the messenger is speaking, the things that we hear, if you listen to them several times, you hear new information, you get new information, you get the details that you didn't get before. So, subhanallah, this is a great blessing that God has given us.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions?
I have an off-topic question, brother.
Okay, so are we done with the verses before we go into off topic? I would say recommend to everyone, just go through the verses again, see if you guys have any questions on the verses or any comments. We read from 69:18 all the way through 70:44, right? So there must be some some questions or comments you may have. I'm pretty sure. So just
Yes, mashallah. I just wanted to refer to Surah 69, verse 19, that talks about the believers and how joyful they are when they are actually receiving their records. We have all, gone to schools and university, and we know what a record is, and we always want to be, I know it's a human tendency to be among the, the top people. So, mashallah, God has given us this opportunity to strive on his path, and it's all for us. He doesn't need our striving. It's all for us growing our soul and being in contact with him, and through the contact prayers and everything we do, he's aware of that. And it's wonderful because he's the most cognizant, and nothing goes in without being recorded. We have keepers, we have angels that are recording everything we do, everything we even think is being recorded, I think. So it's a very sophisticated system that's like hard to imagine, but it's real. It's going on and it's being recorded. So mashallah, I just wanted to mention that it's actually verse 19. The number is 19, and we know that God gave these numbers to the verses. And we can inshallah hope that if we continue on this path and believe in God and his messengers, we will be among those who are redeemed, and we will have a good record. So we just have to be steadfast in adversity. We shouldn't lose hope or despair, because we know that those who despair are those who are stray. And I have also felt that any time that a hardship happens, it's a test, and God immediately, when you call him, God immediately, comes to your rescue, and gives you power, strength in faith, and immediately you get the power, you get the strength to survive that situation and to even grow in that situation. So as a submitter, we have a different perspective in life, and a non-submitter suffers, but a submitter, grows in tests. Mashallah.
Yeah, mashallah, very true. Yeah, I mean, it's the, like they say, the best high that you can get, like, is the, like, people say that, right? It's like the high of achieving, when you feel so happy that you have achieved something, and the happiness that you get from it. And, if you've ever been in that position, you know that it feels great. And so people strive to do that. Well, a lot of people will strive to do that. And so, yeah, on the day of judgment, exactly that's going to be the sentiment for the believers, because God says anything that you've ever achieved in this world is compare that to the hereafter, is completely meaningless. But the real triumph, the real victory, is in the day of judgment, when it's your eternal record, right? When you know that this is permanent, and this is something that's real, that's never gonna go away. I mean, imagine getting $1 billion in this world, or winning the lottery, or whatever it is. But it's only gonna go so far for anybody. Whatever this 100 years or so someone has to live maximum. It sounds like a lot, but it's really nothing as you go through it. And that money is totally meaningless and irrelevant to your happiness. Cannot even do that. But on the day of judgment, you are a winner, and this is something that is the only thing that really counts, for your eternity. And so imagine, getting to that level, and you realize that, You know, you no longer have to go through anything like remotely, you know, something that would require effort or hardship of any kind. You know, like effort, yes, maybe, but nothing bad will ever touch you at this point. You don't have to worry about provisions or anything. You know, you just live a life of fantasy at that point. And so obviously, you know, it's gonna be amazing for people, you know, who are fortunate. God says, who are fortunate to make it. And so, yeah, exactly. I mean, these are verses that, you know, are thought provoking, because God is telling us, you know, do we want to be in that position, or do we want to be from the later group who is being remorseful and just, you know, just completely wishing that they were dead? You know, I mean, God forbid that any of us ever have to see that. But the thing is, majority of people will is what they're that's what they're gonna see, right? So we have to pray to God that we're not from that group. I mean, it is really going to be a terrible feeling. I mean, everything. I mean, it's just gonna be horrific. I mean, talking about burning in hell. I mean, imagine like when you get a tiny burn, and it's so uncomfortable, but you know, but that's life as usual for the disbelievers. I mean, they just keep burning, and God says, as the skin burns, they get new skins, and you know, so they just keep going through the torment over and over. So, anyways, that's what we're here for.
Mashallah, yeah, brother. I was thinking about what you said earlier about, using an example in this world. If you're just frozen in place, like that can become really uncomfortable. And even that, like, let's just say that was someone's destiny for eternity. They were just frozen, like they couldn't really move, could never stretch out or lay down forever. I mean, that would be such a horrible fate. You would be in of it. I guess, just thinking it from that perspective of how much pain and loneliness, like just from that, and that's like maybe a decillionth of or maybe what our brains can even imagine, because it's not even limited to that. It's so much more severe, and it never stops. It's definitely, I look at it as motivation. I mean, from both points of view, as to not become complacent, and I mean, they're in the Quran. God mentioned, kind of like you said, he points this out to us for a reason, because he could have easily just left all the descriptions of hell out if he chose to, but I mean, he put it in there, for us to take heed. And and I also wanted to say a comment on verse 26 and 27 and 28. It says, they believe in the day of judgment. They reverence the Lord's requital, and the Lord's requital is not taken for granted. So, it's, you can tell, I guess, like who really believes in the day of judgment. Because, I'll talk to people, or they say, kind of like you said, they get trapped in wishful thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I think he lost connection.
Oh,
And
oh.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I think he's having connectivity issues. Hey, brother, welcome back. So I think we lost you, John. Your comment got cut off at the end.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I cut out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's mashallah. That's kind of all I had to say.
Mm-hmm. Praise be to God. Yeah, I mean, this is no joke. We put ourselves in this position, and but now we have to work hard to get out of it. I mean, for sure, it's not peaches and cream. You have to go through tests, as Shima described earlier. So, as we go through these tests, I wanted to say that we can pass these tests when God says, when affliction befalls them, they say, we belong to God and to Him we are returning. And so I was just listening to one of the Quran studies where the Messenger of the Covenant was talking about this, and it was pretty amazing what I heard. And I think he talked about going to prison, and he was locked up in the prison, and and he thought about it, and he said that like I think I'm pretty good or something like that. Like, why is this happening to me? And like he was kind of questioning it or something. God forgive me if I kind of describe it wrong, but inshallah I will let you guys listen to it later. But but then he says that he came to the conclusion like, okay, like it's up to God, like whatever it is, whatever God decides is what happens to me. And just like the Quran says, when an affliction befalls them, they say we belong to God and to Him we are returning. So he said these were words that naturally came out of his mouth. And he says after that, he said God miraculously like saved him, and he's talked. I think it was some person second to Gaddafi. He said that put him in there, and said he was the one who put me in there, and he says he took me out and he hugged me, and I had a limousine waiting for me, and I was escorted very nicely and everything. And he said this is God's. There was a miracle. He says it's unheard of that somebody goes in, to that prison and then ever comes out. He said that's unheard of, right? And so basically, that's something that happened to him in Libya, right? And but he says, these things happen. If these things happen, we have to submit, and we have to know that God is the one who controls everything. He says, if you're objecting, like, even if you're questioning, like, why am I going to this? I'm such a good person and whatnot. Like you're failing your tests, and so you have to completely submit and know that God is the one who's doing everything, and He's the one who can fix the situation, and whatever He's doing, no one can help you except God. And we are steadfast through these situations, then God will help you. And he said this may seem miraculous, but it is easy for God to do. MashaAllah.
But we should also remember that, during those tests, Satan gives you all the lies. We know that Satan is a liar and start like giving you every possible scenario and lie. And if we treat him as an enemy and we know that God is protecting us, inshallah, we will see those miracles.
Mm-hmm. Of course, we will be tested with all of those things, right? I mean, so Satan will never doesn't ever stop working on you, right? I mean, whether you're going through something good or you're going through something bad, I mean, Satan's always there trying to whisper and mislead you so you fail, whether the situation is good or bad, right? So we have to be constantly mindful that we're doing what is required of us at that point. Our state of mind is where it needs to be, that we're not objecting, that we're submitting. And it's really easy to say, but I don't know if like we actually follow through with it at all times. A lot of us, like we may fail these things sometimes, right? But if we're mindful and that's our attitude every day, then we will see God's help and we'll see the miracles. And so, like we read today about people that they are going in one mode, like they're not like going up and down, like when they're touched by adversity, despondent; when they're blessed by wealth, stingy. They're always doing one thing, which is being righteous, doing the things God tells you to do. Whether things are going good, whether things are going bad, you're just always going to follow God and you're always going to submit. And that's all we have to prove through these tests, is we're going to be steadfast, we're going to worship God through everything, and then God will fix every problem, every situation that we have in our lives. And we will see slowly that, as we pass those tests, there's something interesting that I also was listening to. Was like, he said it could take you 20 years, it could take you 10 years, it could take you 2 months, right? Passing those tests, right? So really, may God allow us so to fly through those tests that are set up. Obviously, we underestimated the scale of those tests. That's why we are here. But God willing, we can pass them, because that's the only way that we'll ever survive.
Yes, mashallah. What I've learned is that what makes it easy to be steadfast during those tests is to constantly remember the good times. We are all enjoying our time as submitters, and when a test comes up, if we focus on those times and how God has been, blessing us with His, showering us with His blessings, so it makes it easier to go through the tests and know that the same God, the same Lord that was showering me with blessing now wants this test. Actually, Satan executes that, but God allows that, so that makes it a lot easier to go through the test, inshallah.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, mashallah. It kind of reminded me of the verse in Surah 88, verse 15. It says, when the human being is tested by his Lord through blessings and joy, he says, my Lord is generous towards me. But if he tests him through reduction of provisions, he says, my Lord is humiliating me. Now, that's obviously, for the ones that, who think God is humiliated, that's not applying to the submitters, but that's, I guess for me, that just maybe that tells me that it's kind of sets a precedent that God will test us, like even believers and submitters, at some point, through blessings and joy, and He'll also test us through reductions and provisions. But as y'all said earlier, the submitter is going to submit to whatever reduction comes their way, God willing.
Also, I wanted to mention that, sometimes these reductions are, there's a possibility that we did something wrong. So it's not always a test, it's something like could be some sort of punishment. So that's actually a blessing, because we can, ponder and we can think what was happening like 2 days ago, or I don't know, even for me, it happened like 4 hours ago. It was an occasion that I did something wrong, and 4 hours later I saw the consequence. So you can see what's going on and you immediately understand, I did something wrong, I'm not going to repeat this. And if so those hardship and some difficult circumstances are sometimes, I would say most of the time, the result of our own deeds, and we should actually reform and repent. And we understand after a while, we see a pattern that, okay, I did something, now I'm being punished, or I'm being pinched, or I didn't do anything, inshallah, and now I'm being tested. And throughout both of them, God is helping us, mashallah.
Inshallah. Okay, so I guess there was some off-topic questions about the funeral and how it could be carried out and stuff. And so if we can bring up those questions now, I think we can. If there nobody has anything to add to any comments or questions about the verses we read, we can move to off-topic and discuss those questions. So, so one of the questions I believe was about how a person can be buried, or like what should we do when a person dies? Is there a specific way you have to bury the person or whatnot? So we have no special way of burying a person. I know the part in the Quran talks about the two brothers, and he buried his brother, but that doesn't mean that's the only way that you can get rid of the body. I mean, of course, burying a body is a good way to, like, for example, not have the whole decomposition process happen like in front of you, and smell and everything that goes with decomposition process, right? All the obviously it's a but so that's one way of doing it, right? But that's not the only way, right? So it doesn't matter, like people think that if you're a Muslim you have to be buried, but what happens when someone dies in an explosion, or someone drowns and you can't find the body, or whatever, or the body gets burned or something like that, right? So it doesn't. So there's no set requirement. That's why there's no set requirement, and it's irrelevant because whatever way your body is buried, the moment you leave this world, it becomes irrelevant. And so, like, if you want to donate organs to whatever society after you die, you can do that. It's irrelevant. None of that is going to matter to you as a person at that time, because your body's already gone, and whatever you did in this world is everything that matters. But the thing is, there is the idea of funeral prayer that's mentioned in the Quran, and that refers to a prayer that you do as a congregational prayer that is done when a person is deceased. So that's something that you observe, but how the body is disposed is irrelevant. You can be cremated, it can be buried. If in the future there's other techniques, solutions that are available, you could utilize those. Like, I don't know, there could be many ways. I haven't researched them, but yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I was gonna Google burying the body, but then I don't know if that's gonna have backfire.
No,
Like
don't
knocking
worry.
at my door.
Yeah, mashallah. Would be. Didn't the messenger of the covenant? He was with a. He had a Q&A. I think it was towards one of the end of his audios, and I think he was maybe asked about. I could be wrong, but I want to say I want to say he said cremation. Don't quote me. cremation was okay, because I think there was this guy who was just interviewing him or asking him questions, and one of the audios switched to this is one audio video, but it had multiple, I guess, clips and
Yeah, it's possible. I've heard some similar things about donating organs and stuff, and so like yeah, he does talk about it definitely.
So the actual funeral prayer is basically just a prayer. Well, I guess I heard you say earlier it was comes from from the Muslim part of the world. But what about so like if you have a Christian or people who bury or someone at a church or something, is as long as they don't mention any idols, I mean, could it technically be okay? I'm just wondering. Like, would it still be a funeral prayer? I guess it's just their version. But if they mention idols, maybe it's not good.
Right. Are you saying that you could? So basically, the funeral prayer is like a salat, you know. So I will go through like what I know. So basically, you stand by the dead person's casket, if available, or just declare for the group that you will be doing the prayer for that person. Then you declare your intentions of doing the funeral prayer for this person, and raise your hand and say Allahu Akbar, and you read Surah Al-Fatiha, you know, the key, and you say Allahu Akbar without raising your hand. Then you declare the Shahada, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, which means I bear witness there's no God besides God and He has no partners. Then you say Allahu Akbar again without raising your hand. Then you say your invocation to God, the supplication, the dua, like whatever supplication you have for the person, asking God for His mercy on the dead person and to grant him or her forgiveness and reward from Him, and keep him or her with the righteous in the hereafter, and admit him or her to paradise. So that's the prayer for the person, right? And then you say, without raising your hand, you say Allahu Akbar the third time, and do more prayers, and then end the funeral prayer by saying Salãmun Alaykum. So basically, you know, you say Allahu Akbar, you recite the key, then you say Allahu Akbar again, then you say the Shahada, then you say Allahu Akbar again, then you say some prayers, then you say Allahu Akbar again, then you say some more prayers, and then you say Salāmun Alaykum and Salāmun Alaykum. So it's very short and straightforward, and that's how it's always been done. And so the part here that people usually have question about is when you pray for the person who's dead. Now, a person who is already died, you praying for that person, or whether a person's alive, doesn't actually change his destiny, right? But it's just a way for you to grow your soul when you ask God for anything, right? So it's not that by you asking God for this, that it's not like this person was going to hell and now you ask God for forgiveness for this person and now this person's going to go to heaven. There's no intercession as we know it, right? Intercession does not work. But this is just for your own soul growth, and is a reminder for you that, you know, this, that obviously, you know, you will be in that position someday too, so worry about yourself as well. But the thing is that it will not change the person's destiny. Like whatever they're destined for, they're gonna you know, get that anyways. And so you're not doing any sort of intercession or any kind of idol worship. Now we have to be aware that since the funeral prayer is you know, essentially asking forgiveness for a person, we know that we're not supposed to ask forgiveness for an idol worshiper, right? Now an idol worshiper can be a disbeliever, an idol worshiper can be like from any faith, right? An idol worshiper can be a hypocrite whose ego could be his idol, right? And so we know from the verse in Quran where we're not supposed to stand at the grave or observe the funeral prayer for a hypocrite, right? So so we know that the funeral prayer specifically uh, does not is not should not be observed for someone who you know as a hypocrite, disbeliever, idol worshiper. It's meant for the believers, right? So you can only ask forgiveness for people who are not idol worshippers. So if there's a funeral,
MashaAllah.
yeah. So if there's funeral prayer happening, and you know this person who's died is an idol worshiper, you're not supposed to do the funeral prayer. But you know, if it's your family member or someone like that, you don't have to do the funeral prayer. But doesn't mean that you shouldn't, you can't participate in the burial process, or you know, help with like whoever is attending the funeral, or anything like that, right? But you just have to be careful that you're not doing the actual prayer. I mean, that's something that's forbidden for the believers.
Yeah, MashaAllah. Excuse me. Yeah, I did. I do remember now. It did say in part of the somewhere in the Quran where the funeral prayer is not to be observed for the hypocrites or those people. And it kind of reminded me, like we can't pray for once someone's destiny is sealed. There's like you said, observing. From what I understand, observing it's an act of worship, I guess, because it shows that we acknowledge God to be the forgiver, and it reminds us that we need to seek our own forgiveness and reform. Yeah, there used to be, I think, with the Catholic Church for a long time, they would go around towns and collecting money from people, and when people would put their coins, in this little bucket, the bucket, the guy who was collecting it with the church would ring his bell, and he would excuse me, he would go around town, saying every time the bell rings, a church or a soul in purgatory sings, So it was kind of funny. It just reminded me of that.
Didn't Brother John? Didn't they sell the lands of paradise?
The lands of paradise or the
Yes,
lambs?
there is a story that during the Renaissance, before the Renaissance, the Catholic Church was selling the land of paradise for a price to people, so so that they would buy lands in paradise and go to heaven. And then
Oh.
one of the scientists came along and asked the Catholic Church to sell him the whole hell. They said, then why do you want the hell? They said, well, it's not your business. Just sell me the whole hell. And then they sold him hell. And then he declared that people, I bought the whole hell. Okay, I'm not gonna allow anybody inside. So this is just a story that the same thing that they go around, and the same thing is in Shia. People go to visiting the tombs of imams, and then they put money in the tombs. In the we call it zari. In that metal box which is around the tomb. Around the grave, and they put money inside. May God forgive us. We used to do that when we were Shia.
Yeah.
Oh, I think John is trying to say something.
Brother John, you're
Okay.
But he's muted.
No, I think it's lingering.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Still it's echoing.
Yeah. Weird.
Maybe you could unmute him and mute him again and see whether that fixes the problem.
Sure. No, it says ask to mute. It doesn't. He's
Oh,
already.
okay.
muted anyways. He left.
Okay.
So, Brother Suleman, I have a question regarding the number of people that should do the funeral prayer. Is it just, could it be one person, or does it have to be a congregation?
Well, it's done as a congregation, right?
Okay.
Yeah. But if there's only one person, I guess, then it can be done.
It can?
If you're the only person, and let's say there's two people in the desert or middle of nowhere, and one person dies, the other person will. Yeah, you have to have at least one person, basically. Yeah.
Okay. So it's not required, right? It's just something that you can choose to do or not to do. Or is it required of a submitter to do that, to do the funeral prayer?
Not really. I mean, but someone should do it. Someone has to do it. But it's not that everybody has to do it.
Okay. So I mean, now that we are submitters and, a fellow submitter, passes away, we should do that for them.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Yes.
All right. Are there any other comments, or questions? Okay, so if not, God willing, we can conclude our study. So thank you all for joining us. God willing, our next study would be on English study would be on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. And God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
God bless you.
Assalamu alaikum.